Moody, I'd like you to meet my bodyguard.
Happy Friday, everybody, because it is Friday while we're sitting here. We're exciting on a Friday night, but it's Nathan and Jessica. Jessica, how you doing?
I am fantabulous
All
now.
right, you're fantabulous. That's a great way to put it. Because it's another episode of It's a Classic, the podcast where we sit down, Gen X versus Gen Z, to decide if the movies that I grew up on truly are the classics that I believe them to be. Jessica, you are 17, is that correct?
Yes.
So many of these movies you have never seen.
Never seen before.
You've never seen them before. In fact, actually, for the first two movies, they are ones I don't even think you've ever heard of before. Except for me. You can't count from me. You had never heard them before.
Actually, no. The second one I have heard of before because of the actors in it.
Okay, well, here's, as you may have already guessed,
Yes.
by the title of this podcast, that we are talking about My Bodyguard. One of my favorite movies of all time. Believe it or not, really. I'm not just saying that because we watched it, but truly, 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 it is one of my favorite movies of all time. My Bodyguard from the early 80s. In fact, let's talk about it. 1980. This movie came out the same summer as Empire Strikes Back,
Which
believe it or
is very
not.
apparent because they have... I mean, in the first shot, they've got him playing with an X-Wing.
Yes, they
which
do.
is great.
Well, it's not the first shot, but early on he's
Yeah.
playing with an X-Wing. That is correct. And definitely by the fashion that you see in this movie.
I love it.
Yeah, because it's a lot of bell-bottoms and platform shoes and really tight shirts on Matt Dillon. But that leads me to talking about who's in this movie. So My Bodyguard, starring Chris Makepeace, who at the time was kind of a mid-level it guy in these movies. He had already been in a movie with Bill Murray called Meatballs, which is probably on our list at some point, Meatballs. That was kind of where his claim to fame. Interestingly enough, in Meatballs, he basically plays the same character. Kind of an outcast, nice kid, but he's kind of on the outside of everything. And Meatballs, I can't remember if he's actually beat up, but like he is in this movie, but at the same time, the outcast kid. This is also the debut of Adam Baldwin, not one of the Baldwin brothers. However, you may know Adam Baldwin.
I do.
You do, from the great, epic, and yet rest in peace is now gone, Firefly.
I love that show.
Adam Baldwin, yes, that's right, Jane Cobb. Adam Baldwin's first movie where he plays Ricky Linderman. Chris Makepeace plays Clifford. Adam Baldwin plays Linderman, who is this kind of legendary outcast. A lot of stories about him. You know this kid in your school, right?
Yeah.
He's the one that has all the stories about him. You know, he broke a teacher's legs. He beat up a cop. In this movie in particular, we'll get into the story behind him. We also have Matt Dillon.
Yeah.
Matt Dillon playing Moody. Playing Melvin Moody is his full name. And
Big M.
The Big M. That's what he wants to be called. He wants to be called the Big M. Matt Dillon, truly, this is his first full-on villain role. Believe it or not. It's really because in his other movies, he kind of played the anti-hero, like in The Outsiders.
Yeah.
Dallas is kind of an anti-hero.
Yeah.
He's got that heart of gold, but deep down, but really seriously, he's very troubled. And also, we got Martin Mull. We have one of my favorite actresses of all time playing Grandma, Grandma is,
she is my
she's
idol.
amazing, and that's Ruth Gordon. Playing Grandma, and she's the kind of grandma who's constantly hitting on guys. Because the plot is this, and Martin Mull's in it as well, and we'll get to some other people that show up in this movie. There's some interesting cameos. The plot of this movie is that Clifford lives with his dad. His mother's died, I believe, in a car accident, but they live in a hotel in Chicago. His dad is the manager of this luxury hotel where he lives with his grandma. They live up in a penthouse suite where they spend their time looking at women across the way in the skyscrapers with a telescope, which
really uncomfy scene.
Really uncomfortable scene. Really uncomfortable scene and really hilarious scene when I was a kid. It was funny, but I can see how it's a little bit cringy now.
Yeah.
But Grandma spends her days sitting down in the bar, drinking and hitting on men her age, whether they're married or not, which leads to a lot of different issues going on at home.
Iconic.
But she's okay. You're throwing out words now. Let's just stick with she's awesome. You start throwing iconic. I feel like you're trying.
Icon.
She's an icon, really. That's what you want to be when you grow up.
She's an enigma.
No, she's not even an enigma. That's not even the right word.
I am just using words.
Yeah.
Also, speaking of words, I would like to make an apology for the last episode where apparently I used the word trope way too many times. I'm
way
sorry.
too many times. That was like at
so
one point
sorry.
it's like you found a new word and you wanted to use it. So anyway, that's kind of who's in this movie. There's a couple of not cameos, but there's one uncredited appearance.
Is that the girl in the diner?
Well, that is one of them.
Yeah.
Joan Cusack, the sister of John Cusack, is in this movie, and she actually has a speaking role. She plays Shelley, who has a crush on Moody, who Moody ignores, and because she's a little bit awkward and goofy.
Yeah.
But one of Shelley's friends is someone who became a superstar in the 80s just a few years later in a little movie called Flashdance, and that's Jennifer Beals. Jennifer Beals is in this movie as one of Shelley's friends. Now, the plot of this movie is, we'll get back to that, it's basically that Clifford lives in this hotel with his dad and his grandmother, and he starts at this new school, and it's different from the school he went before because you get the impression that he went to the Southside Academy, which was more of a rich kid school. So everybody behaved. But the school he's in now, it's one of those ones that it was very, maybe stereotypical in the 80s. You know, it looks really run down. It really looks kind of like a war zone. I mean,
it does.
I mean, you looked at it. You actually
the bathroom.
The bathrooms were horrible. You told me though. You said this was the most realistic high school you've ever seen.
Because there's a scene where Clifford walks into the gym and the orchestra is practicing right there.
Well,
and
the string ensemble's practicing. It's not the whole orchestra.
Yeah,
but.
it is the most normal high school thing I've ever seen, where the band or the orchestra is just in random places practicing, and I loved that.
Okay, yeah,
so
I mean,
funny.
it is pretty funny because that's a scene where he's trying to talk to Linderman, but that was the thing you said to me was like, and that's an interesting thing because one of the reviews for this movie was by Roger Ebert, one of the most famous critics of all time. Do you know who Roger Ebert is?
No.
No, you need to do a lot more reading on Roger Ebert. Roger Ebert hosted a show called Sneak Previews with his counterpart, Gene Siskel, which later became At the Movies was the name of it. And Roger Ebert had won a Pulitzer Prize. And so he was a great reviewer, great writer, very smart, sharp guy. But he loved this movie. And this is the reason he loved it. He said, what I loved about this movie was, even though there's some predictable parts, the end is predictable, he said that the high schoolers are high schoolers.
They are.
Yeah, they're just kids. They're not this kind of sex crazed, overly. They just seem. Clifford's just a kid.
Yeah, they're all kind of awkward. I mean, Moody's the big tough guy,
but he's
honestly,
awkward.
He's so awkward.
He's really awkward and weird. I mean, he's the tough guy, but you sense immediately that he's insecure.
Yeah,
and he's got a posse around him that they do all the work for him, which makes you wonder.
And all of them are awkward.
And all of them are awkward, and they hang out in the bathroom. And so when Clifford gets to the school, what he finds out immediately is that Moody kind of runs the school. Right? He takes protection money, quote unquote. To protect the kids from Linderman. Who's Linderman? Let's talk about him. Ricky Linderman is Adam Baldwin. He's kind of this mythological, almost monster, right, in the school.
Yeah, they kind of make him to be this. Oh, I had an analogy in my head, and I can't.
Well,
think
don't
of
worry
it
about an
anymore.
analogy. It's actually it's interesting because that's what he is in the mind of the kids. Right?
Yeah.
Linderman killed a kid. He got arrested.
He's the monster under the bed. They're like, what is he going to do next?
Yeah, nobody wants to sit next to him because they're all terrified of him. But when we see Linderman for the first time, I think it's really obvious in the way, because the first time we see him, he comes into this classroom. What did you think the first time? I mean, when you hear his name, what did you think the first time you saw him when he walks in the room?
What did I think the first time?
Yeah, what is your first impression of the character of Linderman when he walks in?
Oh, the character. I just saw him as like that quiet kid that you know.
Yeah, he's real sad.
Yeah, he's very just kind of drawn back, like someone that if I saw him sitting in a classroom, I'd probably sit by him because I knew that nothing was going to happen. Like you feel
that.
Yeah, I feel like that. he just kind of exists and he does his own thing.
He doesn't talk to anybody.
No.
He just kind of, he gives the teacher his pass. He sits down, and the teacher you immediately recognize.
I love her.
She's very empathetic, right?
She is.
She's gentle with him. Where all the kids are terrified of him, she looks at him, and you can visibly tell that there's this compassion she has. So already from her that something's not up to what everybody's saying, right? So over the course of this movie, you have it becomes obvious, right? Moody's picking on Clifford, and Clifford realizes very quickly after a confrontation in the bathroom that Moody's afraid of Linderman.
I love that scene because he's in the bathroom, Moody's picking on Clifford, and then Linderman walks in.
No, he doesn't walk in. He steps up. Remember, he's already in the bathroom.
Oh, right.
He's in there smoking a cigarette.
He stands up. He's like crazy tall. And he stands up, and Moody immediately just walks out the door.
And I've met Adam Baldwin at the Dallas Fan Expo. The dude is huge. He is so tall.
I've seen the picture.
You've seen the picture that I have? Yeah, he is huge guy, super nice guy. That's the thing. I feel like, in a way, there's a lot of Adam Baldwin you kind of see in this movie. Not that Adam Baldwin's this soft person, but he does have a very having seen Adam Baldwin with his fans and with like kids, he's just a very nice guy who is a strong guy, but very gentle and an appropriate, kind of in a way that you just feel like, dude, I could be friends with this guy. He's really cool. So anyway, we find out Moody is afraid of Linderman, and that's when Clifford gets this idea.
He gets the idea to make Linderman his bodyguard.
Not even make him. He actually offers to pay him.
Yes, he offers to pay him.
Yeah, he says, hey, I want to pay you to be my bodyguard. What was the price? 50 cents a day?
Something like that.
It was like 50 cents a day, and I'll also do your homework because I'm pretty smart.
Yeah, and then the first time we hear him speak, his only words are, not interested.
Not interested, and he walks away. And so... kind of over, it doesn't even really show you how he does it, right? Clifford gets locked in a locker. Linderman's going to leave him in that locker.
You think he's going to leave him?
You think he's going to leave. He comes back. He opens up the door. Linderman opens up the door. Clifford gets mad at him, and then it kind of cuts away, which I felt was interesting because what they did was they cut out the traditional
montage of I'm gonna pay you.
Well, they have a montage, but this is what I think. They don't waste their montage on that.
Yeah.
They
save it for the
they
good
save
one.
it for a really good scene.
I noticed that. I kind of thought about this, and I may be wrong, but maybe this is the first time Linderman has had someone kind of stand up to him and kind of...
And that could be...
...get, in his face. And he's like, oh, okay.
And that's very clear in the scene, because Clifford's not afraid of him.
No,
he
starts, cussing him out and yelling at him. And Linderman just kind of looks at him and oh.
And he actually kind of grins.
He does.
He kind of grins like, okay, this kid's not afraid of me.
Different.
So he does. He hires Linderman as his bodyguard, which then they have their little confrontation that Clifford runs in and starts with Moody. He creates this issue, and they come out, and there's this great scene where he says, Moody, I'd like to introduce you to my bodyguard, which was in all of the promos. Like every trailer, every TV commercial had that scene. And Moody gets left behind by his friends because they don't want to mess with Linderman. Yeah.
Also, his Clifford's friend, what's his name?
The kid who's everything's doom and gloom.
Yes.
His friend's named Carson. Named Paul, I think Quant is his name, and I think that may have been the only movie he ever did.
Huh.
But
he's funny. But he's in that scene too, and he's like, yeah.
And then he's
gonna protect us all.
And then he gives Moody the finger, and he's got those goofy gap teeth with he needs braces and everything. So it's pretty funny.
He's cute.
But then what happens is Linderman basically says, I'm tired of this. I'm out. I did it for you. We're done. And he walks away. And that's it. Linderman wants to be left alone. And he goes back to this kind of troubled looking. You get very much the impression he's a tortured soul. By the way, we're going to get into spoilers. You should probably have already figured that out by now. Yeah. So we'll put a warning on the podcast itself. But if you haven't watched this movie, go watch it first. It's really short. It's on HBO right now.
It's very, very short.
It's very short. It's like an hour and a half. So up to this point, was there anything that surprised you so far in the movie?
I think the fact that I was expecting Linderman to actually be kind of this scary guy.
Yeah.
And he wasn't, and that took me by surprise, and I loved it.
Well, and that's what you kind of. In fact, it's really funny in a movie much later in the 2000s, Drillbit Taylor, which is kind of a spoof of this a little bit. Adam Baldwin shows up dressed as Linderman.
Oh my gosh!
and his line is kind of like, "A bodyguard for a kid? What a dumb idea!" That kind of thing. So he kind of spoofs it a little bit. For me, it was the surprise that it kind of they have this first encounter, which I guess it is predictable in hindsight. But at the time when I'm a kid, and this was one of the first movies just me and my mom went and saw, that Linderman's like, okay, I did it, I'm out. And Clifford has this impression that they're going to be friends. He believes that by buying this bodyguard service that they're now friends. And that leads to a couple of uncomfortable confrontations or situations till finally, and this is the only part of the movie where I feel like they could have camped out a little bit more, but I understand for speed and pacing of the movie what they were trying to do and get to this point. But Clifford finally figures out where Linderman, he follows him. That's right, because that was that great scene where he follows him with his chauffeur.
Yeah.
And he chases him down, and Linderman walks away from him. He's like, "Go home, Clifford. I'm done with you." And Clifford's like, "I don't know where I am.
Yeah. I am lost.
I am lost, and
I
don't know where I am." So Linderman takes him with him. And okay, so here's my thing. How long do you think this next montage was? Like, how much time transpired in this montage?
With the bike?
Yes. Because they go to this shop, and Linderman's got this motorcycle he's been trying to rebuild.
I feel like it's like a week of buildup, because after the montage, when we get to the hotel, his grandma's already heard about him, and his dad's already heard about him.
Well, it's funny.
So I feel like
because you have this montage, and what the montage is them looking for the parts for this motorcycle.
Yeah.
And I think it's meant to be like a day, but I couldn't remember.
It looks like it's been like a week.
It does. And I
need
need to go back, because Linderman wears the same thing through the whole movie.
He does.
You got to watch Clifford to see if his clothes change. But anyway, they get this motorcycle built, and there's this and this is actually really famous. This is very well known, and you see it in clips from what do you call them? Recap clips of the 80s and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Of them riding on this motorcycle, trading places, one riding in the back and standing up with his arms, and there's this victory thing.
Yeah.
And they're riding around Chicago, and it's in this when you realize that these guys, you're watching these guys become friends, and they're finally becoming friends, and it really has nothing to do with the bodyguard thing. They've bonded over this motorcycle.
Linderman's kind of just letting his guard down.
He lets his guard down
finally, and he's
smiling.
Yeah.
You actually see him smile for the first time. So we get to the dinner scene, which I told you is one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie.
It makes my heart hurt, but I love it.
So Linderman is there with Clifford, and he's having dinner with Grandma. And Grandma's being Grandma.
She's being
Ms. Peach, because their last name is Peach.
She's
Peach.
being respectful to the young man, but she's very much being Grandma.
she's being respectful, but at the same time, and I love it, because she starts by reading his palm.
Yes.
And she's reading his palm, and she's telling him he's got a lot of girlfriends, and you can see this kind of sad Linderman going, well, no, not really. And she's like, I'm talking about the future. And then, she says he's super smart, and he goes, well, I'm assuming that's the future too. And then Clifford goes, what's that on your wrist? And you see, just very faintly, you see a scar across Linderman's wrist. And he pulls his hand away. So now you've got this other kind of insight into him that prior to this, what we have learned is that Linderman has come home and found a year ago, Linderman had come home and found his brother dead. Yeah. Who'd shot himself. And so now we've got a reason for all of this melancholy and sadness, and I'm sorry I forgot that. That's a little bit earlier before this scene.
When I learned about this, it made me think of what was he like beforehand?
Yeah, you kind of wonder about.
I want to know if he was like a regular kid.
We get an impression from when he kind of shares the story later on that he seems like he was. He goes, my brother who I found dead, I raised him. Yeah. And he goes, so he's got kind of this, he's had to be an adult. And he's like, the kid would drive you crazy. You tell him to sit down, he'd stand up. You'd tell him to do this. He said I love that. He goes, you take him into a store, he'd walk out with half of it in his pocket. Yeah. He was 9 years old. He was like a shoplifter. But Linderman had found him with his dad's gun on the floor, shot in the head. So this was a big deal for him. It was very traumatic. And so we see in this scene with Grandma that it looks like he's attempted to kill himself over it. But I love it because Grandma she takes his hand. He clenches his fist. She takes his hand and she goes, Ricky, it's okay. You're among friends. You're among friends. And
but she says, you
let go. She says, let go.
No, I think she says open up.
Or open up. That's what she says.
Something like open up. And that hit me and I was like, oh.
Because there's this, he's got his hand clenched and she goes, open up, you're among friends. And then he kind of relaxes and we have this really sweet scene. And then.
And they don't push it.
No. And so you've got this really nice, it's not overdone. It's very subtle.
But it gives you something to think about. And it's not, it makes you kind of sit and just.
Which is where we're headed with the next scene, because the very next scene is now Linderman has made it into the circle with all of Clifford's friends. Yeah. The friends he's made. And they're all sitting at the park and having a great time. They're joking. You see Ricky Linderman joking like a regular high schooler.
He's just a kid.
He's just a regular high schooler.
He looks like he's 30.
Well, everybody in this movie looks like they're 30.
Well, no, Shelley and Clifford don't.
Well, they
look
don't.
Like they're 12.
But they're all about the same age, truthfully. It's just that Adam Baldwin's such a tall dude.
Yeah.
But if you really study his face, he does look like kind of a kid.
He has a baby face.
Yeah. So right about this time, Moody shows up, and now Moody has hired to bodyguard this guy, Mike, who is the biggest,
Let's talk about Mike.
Mike,
why are you fighting children?
I think Mike's supposed to be a high schooler, or at least a college student. He looks like he looks like a 50-year-old college student. I mean, maybe not that old. But he's like a grown man. And that always, when I was a kid, I was like, where did Moody? Maybe he's a friend of Moody's family or something.
I don't know, but Mike, why are you fighting
Mike is this big dude, bald dude, body. He looks like he lifts weights. And that's the thing about Linderman is he's a big guy, but he doesn't look like somebody who works out. He's not like... Yeah. He looks like a kid who's lived on the street and has had to fight.
He's just rough and tough.
He's rough, And so Mike inevitably, Mike starts taunting him. And instead of a big showdown fight, what we get is Ricky trying to leave because he's embarrassed. And this is kind of, you get the impression this is taking him back to his reputation. He's dropped that reputation with his friends. Yeah. But now with this this new guy there and Moody bringing this guy in, this guy keeps talking about, I heard you're a tough guy. I heard you beat up women. I heard you beat up cops and you killed a kid. And so now this story that Linderman and everybody created is now come back. And so he gets up and he starts to walk away, which leads us to this scene where Mike just beats the snot out of him.
Yeah,
it's sad. He beats the snot out of Linderman, and then insult to injury,
he throws the bike into the lake.
This bike, which has been a central part of this entire this entire portion of the movie at this point, Moody and Mike, they throw it in the lake, and
it just I knew how could you? I'm sorry. Whenever it happens, Linderman kind of gets sad, and I'm like, oh no, this is gonna Clifford's gonna try to fix this, but it's not gonna work. This is the end of it.
Linderman runs off, and finally we get this little montage of Clifford trying to. It's not a montage. We just get this like little bit of a scene. It's a little, there's music, and he's walking down the street, and he's trying to find Linderman, and he goes to his house. His mother's like, I don't know where he is, but you get the impression his mother. This is not an abusive home.
It's definitely
it's low. It's definitely, they live in a poor section of town. Yeah. Mom's struggling.
Mom loves him, but
she's struggling.
Probably I'm guessing both parents.
Everybody's traumatized by all this. And so, Clifford goes home. He's upset. He can't find him, and this is when he discovers that Ricky has been hiding out on his balcony. He's come up the fire escape, and when he sees him, he's like, "Dude, where you been? I haven't seen you." And Linderman says, "Give me some money. I'm getting out of here." Basically, he's running away from all this, so he asks Clifford for money, which Clifford gives him. There's a little bit of a back and forth. And you know what's so funny about this? At no point does Linderman blame Clifford for what happened. In fact, he says...
I thought he was going to. I thought we were going to have a moment of, this is all your
fault, and you shouldn't have done this. He just basically says, you're a good kid, man. I'm out. And so Clifford chases him down, and we're kind of at the... we could keep going about the movie, but... This is the big scene I was waiting for you to see.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know how you were. Drama sometimes gets to you. And I noticed that you didn't cry. You handled this one a little better.
Which is a victory.
It is a victory.
I'm banned from watching certain movies because of how hard I cry. This is this is a huge moment
Yeah.
for me not to cry.
So we get to this scene, and it's on a subway, the L platform in Chicago, in the subway. And Clifford's like, hey, man, it's not your fault that your brother killed himself. And that's when Linderman says, it is my fault. I'm the one that shot him. So now all these things we've heard before that we've established about this guy, Linderman, who is this big, gentle giant, it's all come true. He really did shoot his brother. And then he gets into the story. They were playing with their dad's gun. He wouldn't let his brother hold it, which he's already established his brother was kind of a spunky, kind of a Spitfire punk kid. And
but lovable.
Yeah, he loved him. And his brother grabs the gun and it goes off.
Yeah.
Now, this is, when I was younger, man, this is the line in this movie that stuck with me. And it just stuck in my head because to me, this is where it takes this situation. It's very dramatic, and we've seen it in a million movies before. You know, the accidental shooting of my brother, and and this, I think, is where the director and the screenwriter make it. There's just a realism to this. He says, you want to know what he was worried about? He was worried about when Dad came home, he was going to get spanked. And here he is bleeding out from his head.
That part almost got me.
Yeah.
I was like, ugh.
He's like, and
then he says,
you're going to have to take the blame for this one. And what does Ricky do? Ricky puts the gun, and he says, I couldn't even do that. And he says, I put the gun in his hand. Told everybody I found him. And he said, and so now we've got this entire, in a span of about 2 minutes, we've got this entire dramatic weight that's thrown down. And I'm not going to say that this movie is like Oscar nominee, No. It's typical drama of the 80s. It's cliche. There's things, it's predictable. But this scene, I think, man, Adam Baldwin sells the scene so well. For being his first movie, when he says that line about he was afraid he was going to get spanked. There's, to me, and I'm not an actor, I can't judge. I felt like, okay, that whole scene was delivered so well.
Yeah.
Now, what I wish they had done was I wish we had unpacked that scene a little more, because immediately we're back to the park the next day, right?
Yeah. Because we don't
see what Ricky's, because he gets on the subway and he leaves. So
I want to know what he does.
Yeah, what does he do for that
I want to know what
night?
happens.
But what we do know is the next day they see Ricky getting the motorcycle out of the lake.
Which he's not wet at all. So I don't know how.
Yeah, I didn't even notice that. Is he not wet?
He's not. He's just.
Well, he always wears the same brown pants, boots, and army jacket with a white T-shirt. So I don't know. I didn't notice that. I'll go if I ever watch it again. I will go back and see. Maybe it's in IMDb, the goofs. But Linderman is there, and Moody sees him because they just happen to be hanging out at the park because that's what everybody does in Chicago.
It's him, Shelley, and his friend.
Yeah, and Moody comes over and is basically like, Linderman, give me the bike, kind of thing. Because now he's tough. Now he's got some bravado, right?
Oh.
And Linderman doesn't want to give it to him. So once again, we get Mike. Mike shows up. Only this time, this is why I love this. Mike is walking around in a tracksuit with a towel over his shoulder like he just worked out. Mike's that guy, right? He walks around, but he's in this like 80s tracksuit. He's got a towel like around his neck but tucked in this tracksuit, right?
I thought it was just a really weird scarf he had on it.
No.
It took me a second to realize
it's like
it was
a
towel.
It's a gym towel.
So gross.
Oh, I know, isn't it awesome? So he's got that, and so he, the fight ensues, right? Except this time Linderman starts it because he tells him, "Okay, you can have the bike," and then he takes the shot, and then it's just Ricky and Mike, right?
Really brutal fight.
It was pretty. I mean, there was one thing. I mean, he does bash Ricky's head against a tree, and there's blood, coming off the back of his head.
That made me think: is that like a reference to his brother?
Oh,
like
wow, you were reading way too much into that. I didn't cut his head on a tree. Okay, I don't think that was the intent.
Really?
No, not at all. But Ricky. He's in the fight. Things are going okay, and then Moody jumps in and tries to hold Ricky, which then now Clifford decides it's my turn to step up. So he jumps in, and now we got two fights. We got Mike and Linderman, and we got Ricky and Moody and Clifford, or not Ricky and Moody, Clifford and Moody, and Clifford's getting his butt whipped by this skinny Matt Dillon in a tank top who's just like dancing around, throwing punches.
It's so funny.
Yeah, it's really funny the difference of the two fights because you got, you know, like
people who look like they've fought for years.
Mike and Ricky are on the ground punching.
Versus like, huh? You want to go?
Yeah.
You want to go, bro?
But that goes back to the high school thing. You want to go?
Yeah.
You want to go?
And you know what they do? They throw one punch and get caught by the teacher.
Yeah, that's the thing. Well, that's this kind of fight, except they're in public.
Yeah, they don't get caught.
But then you get this, you know, and finally, Ricky, of course, we know, he puts Mike into the dirt, knocks him out, and then he comes over to basically play Mickey from Rocky for Clifford. Like, Clifford gets knocked down, and Ricky's over there going, all right, cover up, get in there. And then he's teaching him, you know, and then Clifford gets knocked down again. He gets a punch in, and Ricky...
Also, do they reference when Grandma says, knock him between the eyes?
Well, that was earlier on in the movie. She goes, if anybody bugs you, knock him between the eyes.
Yeah.
Well, this time, Linderman's like, go for the nose. And that's, again, a really probably well-known scene where on the next shot, Clifford just punches Matt Dillon right in the nose, breaks his nose. He's bleeding, and he's talking about how he broke his nose.
And then... Moody's going back to his friends, and you hear a girl just go, ew.
Yeah, then his friends are like, way to go, man. Nice fight. Way to go. And then you just hear go, oh, you're disgusting, and walk away. And he's trying to get sympathy. And, you know, our movie ends with our group walking off into the sunset with Linderman looking to Clifford and saying, hey, you know what? You're pretty good in a fight. Would you like to be my bodyguard?
Yeah.
I'd pay you. I'm really smart. And, you know, we get that whole repeat.
Such a good, like,
and it's just a happy, simple ending. It's just a happy, simple ending to a very simple, happy movie. Now, we've gotten to the end of it. We've gone through the entire plot. You should go watch this movie. What did you like?
I loved the fact that it felt like a real high school. Like, that's so important to me. When I watch a movie, I want whatever setting I'm in, and I know it's a movie, things aren't going to go perfect, but I want it to be as realistic as possible. Like, Moody getting in trouble at the principal's office. That never happens in these kind of movies. It's always that scenario.
And the principal. But this was great. He's like, the principal's like, hey, Clifford, you know, I'm glad you're here. Don't let him pick on you. Oh, by the way, this ain't the South Side, or wherever you came from. So next time somebody picks on you, you might not want to tell on them.
And also, like, a kid telling their parents that they got picked on, and then their parents calling, and then him being like, oh no, that's so real. Like,
well, yeah, I mean, and in this day and age,
if you are getting bullied and you tell your parents, and your parents end up telling the teachers, you're screwed.
Well, let's talk about this. This is legit bullying. Do you think this is like, if you compare to what people call bullying? I mean, granted, we have horrible bullying these days, you know, with social media and things like that. Do you think there's some similarities here? Because I mean, Clifford's physically assaulted. I mean, they try to make him drink toilet water.
And I like it because it doesn't start out with physical. I mean,
it's more of a mental kind of thing.
Taunts him, and then finally,
because Clifford actually he starts it by making a joke about Moody and not getting up from his seat, and he embarrasses him, and that's where all this kind of started. We didn't hit on that, but I kind of wanted to leave some things a surprise. I think that was good that it was a realistic high school.
It was.
I think.
I love the relationship between Clifford and Linderman. Like, I love the bond that they end up forming.
Well, and that's what you expect from this movie, and I agree. I think what they do was for kids like me that grew up at that time. This movie was great for kids like me who grew up at that time because, you know, the ones who were picked on, you know, this idea of having a bodyguard, having somebody who could come and defend you when you couldn't fight yourself. That was a cool idea. I can remember thinking about it. Ooh, I wonder who would be my bodyguard. But you know, you eventually you have to deal with your own problems, and that's why we get Clifford having this fight with Moody at the end.
And I like that Clifford's not the only one who ends up realizing Moody.
He doesn't.
He ends up just like showing people like, hey, this guy's not that bad.
Well, and he doesn't have to convince them. Like once that first scene where where Linderman sticks up and scares Moody away at the restaurant, everybody's now his friend, and they're cheering for him, which also is something very high school-esque. Is like the person who's on top is the, you know, if you stand up for the little guy or whatever, the underdog, everyone loves you in the underdog world, right?
Yep. Yup.
Anything you didn't like?
Ooh, I don't like Mike. I wish it was like an older brother.
Yeah, an older brother, not Mike.
Not Mike. I don't like Mike because he's like a 40-year-old guy beating up this
He's a
15-year-old.
40-year-old Cuban guy who's like sleazy, hanging out with high schoolers. It's really creepy. It is really creepy. I agree.
It just doesn't connect. Oh my gosh, I love the scenes with the grandma and her like hitting on the guys. It's such a good like side plot that you don't have to pay attention to.
Well, that was actually considered to be one of the weakest parts of the movie because it was a throwaway side plot.
I loved it.
Except for one thing. One thing we didn't mention is John Houseman shows up for like 2 scenes as the owner of the hotel or the director of operations. John Houseman's a famous actor, like The Paper Chase and all these other movies. He was on Silver Spoons, but he shows up and he's only in like 2 scenes. Essentially, he's there to fire Clifford's dad, and Grandma swoops in and sweeps him off his feet, and he almost passes out from dancing with her, and then tells her what hotel, or she tells him what room to come to, and it's just weird. But here's this famous actor for like a minute and a half.
Yeah,
it's really funny. But all right, so. Go ahead.
I don't think there was anything else I really hated.
Yeah, I mean, it's a dated movie. I mean, it is that. It's 1980. The clothes are dated. Some of the things, the insults.
There was a really awkward scene where he was watching the cheerleading practice, and I didn't like that because it didn't fit well.
Well, he was waiting for the teacher, but yeah.
He was.
But the way he was smiling.
We didn't need the montage.
They're in the, you're using montage too much.
Oh, no.
You're using montage, and I'm using it too much. It's not a montage.
We don't need the scene.
It's a scene. It's not a montage. It's a scene, but yeah, we do get some back and forth quick cuts of Clifford watching the cheerleaders. And he's got this grin, and he's clapping for him. That was a little creepy.
But I love the teacher. The
teacher was awesome.
It's for once we have a young teacher.
You thought she was young? I thought she was old.
No, she's young.
Oh, I thought she was. Well, I mean, I thought she was like in her. Not old, but I mean, I thought she was older, like in her 40s. Oh, I thought she was like in her 40, 45.
Well, it's better than the cranky old Miss Smith that we get in
that's true.
Usual movies that
you
kids better be good.
Okay. Yeah, you're right. You're right. That was a weird voice. Sorry. You're right. That's true. Well, I got to say, again, one of my favorite movies. Yeah. I love it. I agree. Mike, creepy. No more Mike. If they ever remade it, let's make it a high schooler and not Mike.
Petition, no more Mike.
We don't like Mike. Sign up for it.
Don't like
Where's
Mike.
Where's the non-Mike cut of this movie? Let's digitally insert somebody else over Mike. Nothing against the actor. It just felt weird.
Yeah, no.
All right, Jess. Time for the final verdict from Gen X to Gen Z. Is it a classic?
I think it is.
Why?
I think it plays into that really. It's short, it's sweet, it's nice. It's a very used storyline, but it does
familiar storyline.
It does it differently. It ends differently, and it.
You think it ends differently? I thought it ended pretty cliche.
With the twist of I'm
the one that killed my brother. Yeah,
and kind of these really sweet scenes that I put in there. That just kind of sticks out as classic.
Okay. Well, it's a classic to me because it's very 80s.
Yeah, it
is the beginning of the 80s. It's 1980. I think it's very reflective of that whole theme throughout. Yeah. And interestingly enough, it's really more like a 70s movie. The dramas of the 70s kind of bleeding into the 80s. I think that's why it's a classic to me, because the 70s movies were very much like that character driven, interestingly enough, this comes out the same summer as Empire Strikes Back, which is kind of the summer blockbuster. This one really isn't, but at the same time it has that sensibility of the 70s drifting into the 80s, which I think 1980s pretty much the 70s, but you still have that. So for me, always a classic. I'll always watch it. I love it. But you know what, Jess? We need to figure out what we're going to watch next.
We do.
And I've been going through my head. I've been thinking to myself, what would be a good one? Maybe what we'll do is send out a tweet or an Instagram post this week.
Yes.
To give us a little hint at what's coming. But you know what? This week, a nice little comedy drama. So until next time, this is Nathan.
This is Jessica.
Hey, you know what? If it's a classic, watch it. If it isn't, watch it, because they're all beautiful. We all love them, and they're all from my childhood. And believe it or not, we love them both.
We love them all.
We love them all. And you know what? We'll talk to you guys later.
Bye.